What up guys, today I'm going to show you how to run our IP tester, and I'm going to be using our KLPAR IP Compact OPS as the example. This video is going to be a little long, a little descriptive, but I want to make sure that it answers any questions that you could possibly would have on it. So right here we have our IP tester. I stole this one from our techs, don't let them know. We have our power, we have our switch, we have a USB, because this unit can be controlled by a Windows computer, and you would also use this to input profiles into the unit. So we'll get to that later. We have our micro SD for memory, and then we have where the air comes in and out, obviously. And then this is where we connect the hose to connect to whatever lighting fixture or IP outdoor lighting fixture we're gonna connect it to. So here we have our hose. This end is going to go into the unit right here, and then we're going to obviously power it. And then you're going to get the same display that you get on most of the Elation lights. It's going to go through it, and then it's going to bring us to our main menu. So now that we have our unit on and we can see the display, our options are test, info, and personality. First, we're going to go under test. Under test, we have auto. Auto will automatically run a pressurized and a vacuum test to your fixture, depending on what profile you use. We'll get to that a little later. And then you have manual test, which you could individually test vacuum or pressure. And this is kind of a good example to teach you exactly how our IP tester works. So we have a target value, we have a minimum value, and we have a hold time. So here we have the target value, which is 3.2 PSI in this case. So the IP tester is going to pressurize the fixture to 3.2 PSI. And then we have a minimum of 2.7 PSI. So after it pushes the 3.2 PSI, it's going to stop pressurizing the fixture, and then it's going to have the hold time, in this case, of 5 seconds. So after 5 seconds, if that fixture gets lower than 2.7 PSI, it would be considered a fail. If it passes and it holds more than 2.7 PSI after the 5-second hold, then it's going to pass. So then we have self-test. I never use self-test, so I don't think you'd ever use self-test, so I'm not even going to go through it. So let's go back and then let's go to info. Under info, we only have the software version. There's no other options. And this IP tester is going to be at 200. And let's go back to personality. Personality is going to have the option to choose the fixture of what you want to test. So let's go into it. Right here, you have your fixture option, and we're going to see all the fixtures that we have. So let's just say we want to test a Proteus Maximus. We're going to go ahead and select enter. It shows us all the values. So here you could see that we have our pressure target, our hold target, our pressure target, or our pressure minimum value. And then we could see it says the same thing for the vacuum. So then we're going to go ahead and push enter again. And so that's me selecting the fixture that I want to test in auto when it comes to the test. So let's go back and test, and then select auto, and now we're showing that we're going to test the Proteus Maximus. I'm not going to do it because we don't have a Proteus Maximus. Well, even if you did do it, nothing would happen. It's pretty much going to fail. So let's get out of that. So that's how you would choose your fixture that you want to IP test. So let's keep going under personality. Under personality, we also have unit. If you want to use KPA, go right ahead. We also have PSI, which I'm going to use. I'm going to select enter. And then we have our service setting. Our service setting gives you the option to edit a profile of a fixture. So let's try it. So we're going to go ahead and select the service setting. Our password is 50 or 050. There you go. Push enter. And now you have set fixture. So we go in here and we could change, say we just had the Proteus Maximus and we didn't like that value that it had. We could go in it and change it. So say we don't like the hold time of 15 seconds. I could go ahead and move left to right, 13, 14, but I'm just going to leave it at 15. And then you also have a reset default. I don't really know why you would use it on such a simple IP tester, but if you need it, you got it. So instead of bringing out the computer and making a profile for the KLPAR IP compact OPS, what I'm going to do is just show you how to make a profile on the IP tester. It's not going to be as pretty, but you can still completely do it. I'm assuming that when you use the IP tester, you're not really going to need the computer or anything. You're just going to want to make sure that seals and call it a done deal. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go under personality. And just like I mentioned before, we're going to go into service and we're going to go 050. There you go. And then we're going to set the fixture. So I don't really want to mess with anything that has a name. So when you get an IP tester, the unit already comes with kind of like fixture A, fixture B, fixture C. So I would suggest messing with this. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and select fixture A. So if you're looking at the user manual, there's only really 3 things that you need to know, which is the low pressure limit, the high pressure limit, and the detection time. You could kind of tell that these values or these profiles are made through KPA because they have a nice even number, but I'm still going to go through the PSI. So when you're putting the values into the IP tester, you're not going to be able to put the 3.336. So we're just going to have to get it as close as we possibly can, which in this case would probably be the 3.3. And then the whole time is asking for 15 seconds. And then the minimum pressure is going to be 2.901, but we're just going to put 2.9. And then it's just going to be opposite. Well, I guess in the negatives for when it comes to the vacuum, we're going to put the 3.3 and then the whole time for 15 seconds. Oops, too far. And then again, we're going to do the 2.9. So here you could see that we have the 3.3, which is the target pressure. Then we have the minimum, which is the 2.9. And then pretty much negatives for the vacuum, which is going to be the negative 3.3 at 15 seconds and the negative 2.9. We're going to go ahead and push enter. And then we could go back, and every time we go into personality and find fixture A, which is going to be for our KLPAR IP compact OPS, you could see that all those values saved. So we're going to go ahead and push enter to select it. Go back to auto, select auto. And now we have the fixture A, which is the KLPAR IP compact OPS. So let's run the test. The first thing that we're going to want to do is take off this valve. Sometimes you could do it by hand. Sometimes you can't. You're not supposed to have it very tight anyways. But if you can't do it by hand, then you could go ahead and use a 16 millimeter socket. In this case, this little shorty is going to work fine. Depending on what unit you're working on, sometimes you're going to need something a little longer. It just depends on the unit. But in this case, we could just use the shorty. So let's take off the valve. So I have the valve off, and the next thing that we're going to do is connect our hose to it. So as you saw, I just was able to do that by hand. I don't want to crank it anymore. As long as there's a seal on it, that's all that really matters to me. And then we're going to go ahead and push start. So you'll see when you select auto that it'll show you a micro SD error. That's really nothing to be concerned about. That's more for when you run the unit on a computer. But since we don't have a computer, it's really not that big of a deal. So we could just bypass that and it doesn't really matter. So the way that auto works is that it's going to pressurize the unit so the loading bar is full. And as long as in those 15 seconds, it doesn't go lower than that red line, then it's going to be considered a pass. And then it's going to go ahead and move on to the vacuum test, which runs exactly the same. So when you run the IP tester to the unit, it's a possibility that it could fail the first time. You could see the loading bar pressurize, and then once it gets to its max, there's a big step off. And so because of the big step off, it might cause the unit to fail. What you could do to really check is to run another test. So you could see on the second test, the loading bar was already kind of more than halfway, and then it pushed it to the full. And so now it's going to hold it for 15 seconds and run that test again. The exact same thing happened with the vacuum test, so we're going to run it again. After a couple attempts, that it did fail here and there, but ultimately it did pass. So if it was up to me, and I assume that you would do many more of these if you were testing them, I'd go back to the personality, and then I would change some of the values. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit on the high end and then bring the low end a little bit further down. So I'm going to set the fixture, go to fixture A. I see that I'm on 3.3, so I'm going to go up just one. And then I think I'll be okay with that. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with the vacuum. And so now I'm at the 3.4 when it comes to the high end. So let's go back. And then I'm going to let all the air back in that was pulled out from the unit when I was vacuuming. Put that back in. Test, auto, fixture A. Go ahead and run the test again. So you saw the bar that was loading up all the way, and then it drastically dropped down a lot. That doesn't really matter. The whole goal in this is that when it does take that drop down, that it doesn't go any further down than that. So you want it to stay there. Even if it goes a little bit further down, but it kind of settles in, then that's completely fine too. That's what we're really looking for. Like always, I hope this helps, and make sure to check out Elation's forums.